Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to the celebration of the International Day of Women and Girls in Science at Scuola Normale Superiore in collaboration with the Association Friends of Scuola Normale Superiore and also with the support and the inputs from the Joint Committee for Equal Opportunity and from the Elisa University. So my name is Simona Gallerani. I'm a professor in cosmology and astrophysics, and I'm also delegate of the director for activities related to disabilities and equal opportunities. Let me start by presenting our speakers today. Let me start from Sveva Avveduto. Welcome, Sveva. Thanks a lot for being here. Sveva is a National Research Council Emeritus. She's a researcher at the Institute for Research on Population and Social Policies. She's extremely active in gender studies, and among several other initiatives, she is part and president of the Association Women and Science. She will tell us something about this association. So our second speaker is Gizem. Welcome. And she's assistant professor in artificial intelligence at Scuola Normale Superiore. This is a field that is an emerging field, so it's expected to have a strong impact on our society. I'm very happy to have your perspective here today. Then we will have Eleonora Parlanti. She's a PhD student in astrophysics, and she's also involved in a very important international collaboration related to the James Webb Space Telescope. And thank you, Eleonora, also for being here. And then we also have Professor Mauro Silos Labini. He will contribute to the discussion on the gender gap in STEM from the perspective of a man that is also expert of the field. So thanks everybody for being here, and also thanks to you for attending this event. First of all, I would like to ask ourselves why an International Day of Women and Girls in Science. So the celebration of this day has been established in the 2015 by the United Nations organization, and the goal is to promote full and equal access to and participation in science for women and girls. So this occurs a few months after that the Assembly of the United Nations agreed on 17 Sustainable Development Goals that are expected to be achieved before the 2030. So these so-called SDGs represents a list of interconnected objectives that are aimed to reduce any form of poverty and inequality, to ensure the economic, environmental, and social sustainability, and all of this while addressing the challenges posed by climate changes we are witnessing nowadays. And so, as you can see, one of the SDGs is gender equality. Why this is the case? Because women, although they represent half of the world's population and therefore half of the potential of our society, we still have a strong gender inequality at any level of our society. So to start with, we are sadly informed, basically on a daily basis, that women are victims of sexual violence and murders. And furthermore, data are telling us that on average, women earn 23% less than men and spend about 3 times more time than men in unpaid domestic and care works. In particular, a significant gender gap persists at all levels in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics disciplines. These are called STEMs. Our discussion will be mostly focused on gender gap in STEMs. So women are still strongly unrepresented in STEMs and tend to have shorter and less well-paid careers. And this is true even if there is a significant progress in the context of women participation in higher education in general. So what we are going to discuss is why there is this gender gap, what are the initiatives that are ongoing to overcome this problem, are these initiatives working well, is there any progress that we can register, and how can we do better? So these are the open questions that we are going to tackle together today. And before leaving the floor to our speakers, I would like to briefly report on the situation at the SNS. So we are a small community, and we do have a significant gap in STEM. So here I'm reporting the percentage of men in red and women in black, representing different components of our community, following different stages of the university career, from left to right. So you can see students, postdoc, staff researcher, associate professor, and full professor. So unfortunately, the percentage of female is much lower than male at any level, being always smaller than 25%. Of course, there are several considerations that we can do concerning the gender gap at each level of the university career, considering that each of these steps are associated to different phases of a human life. But I would like to go to the root of the problem, and so what I would like to do is to focus on a more in-depth analysis of about the students component, which represents the first stage at the university career. So how to become a student at the SNS? Of course, you need to pass the undergraduate admission competition. And in this figure, what I'm showing is the percentage of male in red and female in black as collected in the last 7 years. So we can see that only 20% of the candidates are female, and that unfortunately this percentage is not changing with time. So this is the very first step in the process, and it already reveals a huge gap in STEMs, since I'm just considering the data from the Faculty of Science. So the first question that we can ask is, why do girls seem to be less interested in STEMs than boys? If we consider the second step in the undergraduate admission competition, so here you can see what is the percentage of candidates that are passing the written exam. So it seems that the fork is still enlarging at this point, and so what we can ask is, why are boys then better performing in the written exam than girls? But one consideration that I would like to do is that a good fraction of our students that are passing the written exam has previously participated in mathematical and/or physical Olympiads. And if you look at the statistics for these Olympiads, you can see that typically 90% of the participants are men. So once again, we can go back to the previous questions and we can ask ourselves why only only boys are interested in attending these Olympiads. And finally, we can look at the final step in the undergraduate admission competition. So this is the oral exam, and we can see that the gap stabilizes, and the final result is that we have only 10% of the candidates that are passing the oral exam and therefore are admitted to Scuola Normale Superiore. So, following the line of thinking that I was proposing, the crucial question inspired by this data is why do girls seem to be less interested in STEMs than boys? So, before leaving the floor to Sveva, that she will tackle this question and she also will provide a more extended analysis about the gender gap in Italy and also in Europe, I would also like to compare the statistics at the SNS with a European university to which the SNS belongs. This is ELISA, which stands for European Engineering, Learning, Innovation and Science Alliance, which is the first alliance of higher education institutions that are coming from different countries. You can see in these slides what are the countries that are involved in this project. Mostly are, it's coming from Spain, France, Germany, Hungary, Romania, Turkey, Switzerland, and of course Italy. And this European university is meant to define and implement a common model of European engineer rooted in the society. And what you can see is that an important point in the vision of this European university is to build a new European higher education which is based on gender balance, specifically in STEM. ELISA is in fact particularly sensitive to the gender gap problem. This is evidenced also by the name chosen for this European university. Which is the name of Elisa Leonida Zanfirescu, one of the very first women to obtain an engineering degree in the world. So if we take data collected for the gender equality plan of ELISA, and we consider the range of percentage between women and men at different stages of the university career from different countries, we find that on average, men represents more than 64% of this university, while women are less than 37%. So apparently the gender gap at the Scuola Normale Superiore is sadly in line with the situation found among ELISA partners. Now I leave the floor to Sveva that will provide us with an excursus about women in science in Italy and on large scales in Europe. So yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, first of all, for having invited me here. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be a speaker in this Aeropago of Science. What I will speak you about is something which already has been touched by our previous speaker, by Simona, and perhaps you are familiar with this report. Is the Gender Gap Report, which is done every year by the World Economic Forum, and it tackles a number of different items, which are health, education, labor, and so on. And unfortunately, still the gap to be filled among between the women and men, if we don't make any new move, it will take 132 years to be completely filled, to be completely closed. So the situation is not nice, and it's not Italian at all. I'll speak about something about education and career in science and R&D. The gender gap, as Simona already told us, it starts early, but with a different pace, because as you can see, the people which are aged between 30 and 34 that have completed tertiary education in Europe are more women than men. And in Italy, they are more women than men. They graduate more quickly than men, and with better votes. The World Economic Forum made this statement that female students and employees are underrepresented in STEM-related fields, and on average is around 30%. Please do remember this number, 30%, because it comes back ever since. And the 30% of researchers are women. And a third of female students choose to study higher education courses in subjects like math and engineering. And we have had already the data, the figures for Scuola Normale Superiore, which are absolutely in line with all the others. In the European Union, this is a situation. We have only just less than 30% of graduated in STEM, but in particular area of STEM, which are those which are in these days more important and more promising for future jobs, like information and communication technologies, the percentage is even lower. That's the situation in Italy 10 years ago. And now the situation is absolutely the same. This data comes from the ANVOR report, which was presented no more than 1 month ago. I was really stunned by this data, but ANVOR is something which has to be, it's something very, very important. So this is the data, exactly the same percentage of women in STEM. And even worse for women which are graduated, 40% in 2012, 39% in 2022. We are there. And occupation, that's the one just in one area, the area of engineering, and as you can see, a little more than 20% of engineers occupied are women. So the situation is absolutely not fair. And again, if you look at the number of researchers per 1,000 employees, in the European Union, or the 27, there are 8.7 women and 14.7 men per 1,000 employees, which are employed in research, whether in Italy this percentage is very, very low. Again, I just show you all may be very familiar with this scissors figure, and we have been told also about by Simona. The scissors start with the percentage of women as students, as graduate, as PhDs, which is more higher, which is higher, and then it's it's at the same level. But as the career goes on, the scissors open, and this is the general situation of the European of the 27, and this is the even worse situation of the career path in STEM. So we have these figures that goes about 80% versus 20% of STEM women in the higher position of career at university. So why they are so few? It's the same question that Simona was posing. Well, there's of course no single cause, and there is of course no simple answer. It's a community of problems. It's a community of causes, and there can be different answers at different levels of tackling at individual versus national or international to institutional. It's a sum of these factors, which are, of course, personal characteristics. There's people which are not interested in STEM, and this is perfectly agreeable. There is socioeconomic background, which, of course, in education, it means very much still. There are the experiences which have been done, so that can hinder the progression in STEM topics. there are a number of intangible factors which I'll speak you about later, and there is a lack of opportunities which can be done. In industry, the situation is even more worrying. Because these are data about the United States, but I'm quite positive that the data is the same in Italy and in Europe in general. Again, what is called a male-dominated industry are those industries which employ less than 25% of women. And only 6.8% of women work in this male-dominated occupation. Women are only 20% in leadership roles, and women held only 26% of computer and mathematical occupation. Of course, it's not just a question of numbers. Of course, number counts. There must be more women in occupation, but it's also a question of position. I mean, if in the ruling position in these occupations, in boards, in CEOs, there are only or mainly men, the situation will be even more unbalanced. And here is a situation for leadership or women. As you can see, nothing to explain. Yellow and blue says everything. And the gender pay gap was already mentioned by Simona. This is really important. It's not that much in the public and university areas because, you know, we have fixed salaries, but still also there are hidden salaries which can be given more to men than to women, such as a bonus for participating in commissions or in other occupations. But still, of course, the main gap in the main divide is in industry and in private sectors. Gender diversity is, of course, correlated with profitability and value creation. And gender diversity on executive teams, on group of teams that do research or any other activity connected with science and technology is consistently more positively if it's correlated with high education profitability across geographies, but also across gender diversity. It's something which there are many studies now that show how gender diversity brings out more profitable research, more profitable results. Summing up, there are female students and employees underrepresented in STEM and related fields. On average, around 30% of the world's researchers are women, and the representation of women in STEM jobs varies from sector to sectors, where female women's engineers and scientists are still largely underrepresented all over the world. And the pay gap is still consistent. And the context is important. The context is everything. Of course, it needs to consider the economic, cultural, and social context in which people live, have been grown up or live currently. And gender disparities comes from this influence, a broad influence of economic, political, social, and cultural aspects. I will examine only one of these. I told you before I will tackle something which is intangible but is very strong, the bias and stereotypes, gender bias and stereotypes. Of course, this gender bias goes from Marie Curie or Samantha Cristoforetti to the women which are home and cook and that's the main objective in life. In science, this gender bias is absolutely there. Something especially often is implicit, is not intentional in the behavior of families, of teachers, of the condition the choice of boys and girls. The ways in which boys and girls are raised up by parents, by the group of friends, by the group of adults they refer to, and of course, very important, the teachers influence strongly their choice and their ideas of the difference between men and women we are speaking of science, but it applies to anything. And the idea that women are not well enough to go to do science, that they are incompetent in this area, that scientific studies are too difficult and the scientific career are too demanding for women is something which is stereotypes that still is there. And ideal scientist is the one that is taught to give total priority to work, and outside her work there's nothing more, or there's not time to do nothing more, nothing else. So in the workplace, the gender balance work very much well, especially in places where women work in male-dominated workplace, and this reinforces these stereotypes because female are, even, I don't know if intentionally or not intentionally, looked at as the caring mother, as the office housekeeper. If you have to ask for a coffee, you 90% of times ask to a woman, not to a man. Or at least it used to be there. I hope it to be so. I hope it has changed or is changing. And of course, there is a work-life balance problem, and the problem is there. It's not something which is perceived. It's really there, and the difficulties in career advancement are there for women. They take more time to PhD or less publication in specific times where perhaps they are growing up a child. And in the male-dominated workplace, the women are perceived as outsiders and people that threaten the norms. So they are a bit looked at with something that can be dangerous to the balance of the place. And then there is this bigger problem, which also in science, unfortunately, is there. We just heard 1 week ago about Turin University, of the sexual harassment that happens in university and in higher education and higher research institution, unfortunately, as much as in general in society. Oops. Which are the actions? There are different actions which are possible. We will speak about the gender balance, the gender equality plans that can be used, special extra financial resources like the Athena Swan project, which worked very well in England. There is an important role of role modeling and mentoring, the people that can be assisted by an older female researcher to show that science is possible for women. And special hiring programs for women that around Europe are there. Again, summing up, women are valuable resources for the research community. The lack of women in management position and the research organization can introduce gender bias on direction of research. And research suggests that gender heterogeneous working group in terms of gender, of race, of different backgrounds produce high quality science. And the gender mainstreaming in institution can enhance the reputation and the position of this institution. I think now the floor is to, I'm sorry, I absolutely can't pronounce, Gizem, Gezici? Something like that. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you, Sveva. I don't know if there is any comment, any question from the audience so far. I would like to ask you to, Sveva. So I know that you have been director of your institute, and so was asking myself, what is the life of a president that is a woman in a male-dominated workplace? How was your experience in this?
Not an easy life, I must confess. Sorry. I can't remember the person that said this, but this is a sentence which always, I think it's always working. To be a scientist and to be at a higher level, you have to have, I'll say it in Italian because I'm not sure the same in English. Una salute di ferro, that means you have to be very strong in your health. Nervi d'acciaio, that means that you have to behave and to not to explode when you would like to explode against this or that. And un marito d'oro. That means that you have to have, I have it, is there. And that means that a husband that is not the one that washes the dishes, is the one that is absolutely paired to you. But out of this joke, I think that certainly there are many difficulties, because still men are not happy to be ruled, so to say, by a woman. Of course, it's not that evident, maybe sometimes it is, but generally they try to be more polite to you, but still you feel that there is something not working in the at least at the beginning. Then they realize that you do not threaten their position, that you can be helpful for their career, that you can be helpful for the advancement of science, of research in the institution, and so the situation changes. But at the beginning, it's not an easy thing. In my institution, I was the first women director, and I believe that our president, Maria Chiara Carrozza, which is the first women president in 100 years, should face similar problems. It's not easy, but it's possible.
Okay, thank you again. And now I ask Gizem to start her speech. We would like to hear what is your experience as a female in the world of science.
Thank you. Before discussing my own experience as a woman researcher, I would like to give some statistics. Statistics are not nice, I should say at first, but my experience, my own experience is better. So the first chart, as you can see, there is this 60 years progress of women representation in STEM fields, and in 1960s, unfortunately, only 1% of the engineering force was women. In 2021, we can see a progress, but still, unfortunately, we are. It's worthwhile. Yes. We have some progress, but still we are not yet there. Unfortunately, we don't have the gender equality in STEM field. In the second slide, I put some statistics according to European Union Statistics Institute, and it has been shown that women were underrepresented as scientists and engineers, and only 41% of the total population, scientists and engineering population, is women in 2022. This share, and the worst thing I think, this share only increased by 20% during 10 years. This is sad, I think, but we have some good news. Although the percentage-wise women representation grew only by 2%, the absolute number of women scientists and engineers increased by almost 50% during these 10 years. In this one, this same statistics based on the region, based on the countries, and we see that the highest shares, highest women representation in science and technology observed in Lithuania and the French island of Corsica with a percentage of 64. And the lowest one was in the Italian region of Northwest with 45%, followed by Malta. These are the statistics, as I said, according to Eurostat in 2022. This is the most recent one. Although we have some progress, some improvement related to gender equality in science and technology fields, unfortunately, based on seniority level, if we analyze the position level of women, the situation got worse, I should say. As you can see, as the level of the position increases, the percentage women representation decreases. It's only woman chief executive, we have only 12%, unfortunately. And in the last slide, according to 2022 McKinsey report, there are two major drop-off points for women in European tech. One, before the university. So the girls probably, they are hesitating to apply to the STEM fields, STEM disciplines. This is the first major point. And second one is during the workforce, meaning that after the graduation of a STEM discipline, unfortunately, the girls, majority of the women do not end up in tech roles at companies, even if they have STEM discipline diploma, like men. So these are the statistics that I have found, but my experience, as I said, is more positive. I am from Turkey, and I am here at Scuola Normale since December 2022, like just a bit more than 1 year. Till that time, I lived, studied, and worked in Turkey. That's why I would like to share my experience as a woman researcher in Turkey, in academia as well as in industry. I graduated from Science High School and then got into Sabancı University, Computer Science and Engineering field. After my bachelor studies, I pursued my graduate studies in the same field at Sabancı University. I should admit that I don't have a clear underrepresentation image during my high school or during my grad studies, but unfortunately, I had a very clear image during my bachelor studies. In computer science and engineering field, we were only 10 female students out of 50, which was like 20%. Whereas in other STEM disciplines, like molecular biology, genetics, and industrial engineering, the majority of the students were female. Despite this gender imbalance that was quite obvious, luckily, I had two women professors that were great role models for me, because I think as a female student, you do need to have great role models for you to carry on your studies. And I still clearly remember that I told myself, if I pursue graduate studies, because at that time I wasn't sure if I want to pursue graduate studies, I want to stay in academia, and decide to stay academia, I want to be definitely like them. They were very successful despite all the obstacles that they have faced as a woman researcher, and they were always very supportive, especially for female students, probably because they were aware of the situation, this gender imbalance. After this bachelor studies experience, I also want to share my research experience in industry related to gender imbalance, gender inequalities. During my PhD, I also worked in a research department at Huawei Turkey R&D Center, which is a very big one, the second largest R&D labs of Huawei outside China. The main of the research departments of Huawei was to apply literature approaches, state-of-the-art approaches to real products of the company. Since at that time my PhD thesis was related to search engines, I joined Huawei R&D Center to gain experience in applied research in industry, because at that time I was really curious about. In this way, I was thinking about making a decision later on between academia and industry. So I thought that if I see how is industry even if you are fulfilling research, it's quite different than academia. So then I thought that maybe I can make a decision, wise decision, or I can make a decision consciously. I started there as a research engineer. Then, like, I worked there almost 6 years. I started as a research engineer, then worked in the team and the department level management positions, especially in the EM position, for instance. Apart from the technical supervision, my role was also to recruit members. I was the EM of the AI team, so I had to recruit team colleagues to the AI team. So at that time, we were conducting technical interviews with a male colleague who was a EM of another team. And the candidates, we were looking for the candidates that have at least a master degree or a PhD candidate, because it was a research team, so we were looking for, I would say, highly qualified candidates in AI-related areas. Here, I need to maybe admit this and make a confession. After the technical interview, at the evaluation stage, if there were 2 candidates with almost equal qualifications, almost all the time I preferred women candidates. That's why, at the end, of course, I could proudly say that my team was the only research team in the R&D center which was composed of more women researchers than men. But yet, my male colleague was teasing me about this, that I am like always positively biased towards women candidates. I mean, he was right. I was, and I'm still, I think, positively biased towards women, because I know by heart that gender inequalities create big obstacles for women. So I think wherever we can, we should encourage them. I encourage them more, since they have already been dealing with so many things, such as various prejudices, stereotypes, and cultural norms propagating in the society. And because of this, most of the time, unfortunately, women also need to cope with the inner feelings of self-doubt and hesitation more than their male colleagues, I think. Apart from my own team, I can gladly say that the situation related to gender balance in my department was quite promising at the R&D center. Our department level project manager, as well as my manager, when I was an EM of the AI team, both were women. Also, after I started to work as the research tech lead, my manager, who was also the department manager, was a woman as well. So I was lucky in the sense that I was surrounded by very successful women role models, after the academia, also in industry, which is unfortunately a rare situation, as we've already seen in the McKinsey report in 2022. Thus, thanks to this, I didn't feel alone or underrepresented at all, neither in academia nor in industry. So I think it's very important for women to carry on, to not to feel self-doubt or insecurities. And recently, of course, I should say a few words about my kind of short experience at Scuola Normale. In the last part of my experience related to gender balance, I came to here, as I said, in December 2022, just a bit of more than 1 year, to work with Professor Fosca Gianotti. At that time, at the very beginning, honestly speaking, I really didn't know that I would work with such a wonderful scientist, with an endless curiosity for science, and that I would be supported in every way by a very successful woman who believes wholeheartedly in true woman power. I should say that I really feel very lucky, and my luck continues, it seems, to have her as my supervisor. Last but not least, just apart from the working life as a researcher in academia and industry, I should mention and thank the most amazing woman I have ever known, my mom. She has always been my side and supported me in every step throughout the way without any hesitation. This is also probably because from the very beginning, she already knew the obstacles by experience, mainly related to stereotypes and work-life balance difficulties that women need to face since she's an engineer and a working mom. Recently, during the decision-making process of coming to SNS, I had some hesitations, probably due to the feeling of leaving my comfort zone and some insecurities, time to say we all have. She was there for me and encouraged me by not letting me doubt myself for a moment even. So I should say that I feel really grateful to have such a great mom. Thank you.
Thank you, Gizem, for sharing your experience with us. And what I would like to underline, so it's the importance of having a women role model, and also the importance of having women supporting women. So I think these are two quite important points that I would like to make. And
I have a question.
yes,
May I ask
sure.
a question?
Yes, sure.
Thank you very much for telling us your experience as hire in the hiring process, which is clearly a key juncture. And actually, you don't worry, because you just applied the criteria applied by Scuola Normale. That is, in case of same score, so you don't have to beg pardon because you have this bias, so to speak. I'm wondering whether this bias was through gender or more through similar research interest with this candidate, because sometimes that's even more important than gender. Were these women you were preferring towards equally positioned men related to their research interest, or just it was just about their gender?
Thank you for the question and for your comment as well. So, of course, we conducted technically interviews based on like coding and the research questions for every candidate without any discrimination, I think. But after that, of course, we had some chats with the candidates related to, based on their research background, but also I was trying to catch some clues related to their personal characteristics, because during the 6 years at the R&D center, I learned that the technical qualifications are kind of less important than the personal characteristics, because they can learn the technical part. They did learn most of them, but the personal characteristics part, like responsibility and such, in that sense, it's more difficult, I think.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Gizem. I don't know if there is any comment or question. Otherwise, I will ask Eleonora if you want to tell us something about your experience in science.
Yeah, the microphone.
Yes, sure. Let me check. Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much. And I am Eleonora Parlanti, a second-year PhD student here in astrophysics, and I'm part of the cosmology group here in SNS. And since I was a kid, I always wanted to be an astrophysicist. And I was very lucky that my parents and my family has always encouraged my passion for science in general, without any kind of bias. Indeed, I remember receiving as a gift for Christmas and birthdays telescopes, microscopes, a chemistry kit to do some experiment, but also dolls and small cuisines. So I was very lucky that I was encouraged to do whatever I liked. And so as I said, I always had this passion for science, so I chose Liceo Scientifico, so scientific high school. But I chose the one with computer science instead of Latin. And that is my first encounter with the underrepresentation of women in science, because we were only 4 girls and 20 boys in my class. And while in the standard liceo scientifico with Latin also, there were almost equal numbers of male and females. So I guess the one with computer science was considered too scientific for girls. Then I enrolled like the physics bachelor at the University of Pisa. And from my memories, I actually remember an almost equal number of men and women, but I actually checked in the last few days, and there was only 20% of females. So I don't know why in my mind it was 50-50, more or less. And then I pursued the physics master in astronomy and astrophysics, and then I clearly remember being only me and another girl there, and another like 10-ish male. Doing astrophysics. And now I'm doing my PhD here in SNS, and despite being less for women than men in astrophysics in general, I think that we are in the cosmology group with also Professoressa Gallerani here, we are doing a good balance, we have a good balance. And also I'm really happy that here in SNS there are these initiatives like this day and Inspira, which you will talk us later. And I'm really happy that this hopefully will improve the current situation here. So my experience, I always seen the underrepresentation of women in science, but I was lucky to have a teacher, supervisor, family, who always believed in me. And so I was, and also thanks to the education that my parents gave me, to do whatever I liked without questioning if it was for girl or for boys. So from this, it looks like I don't have this bias in my mind, because after seeing all this underrepresentation of women, I'm doing physics. But I think that the bias is still inside me, because, for example, when I was writing my master thesis, I was reading a lot of scientific papers, and in scientific papers you have the initial of the name and then the surname. So when I was discussing about the things that I was reading with my supervisor, I remember saying, oh, he's doing this, he's thinking this, and he was correcting me, and he was saying, no, she's a woman. So despite being a woman, doing more or less the same thing, I was still assuming that the other scientist was all men. So yeah, I make time the effort of, in my papers, to put not only the initial of the name, but the entire name, to hopefully decrease this kind of bias.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eleonora, again for sharing your experience. And as I was mentioning before, you are involved in a huge important collaboration at an international level. So I would like you to inform us about what is the situation in terms of gender balance in the JWST collaboration.
Okay, so yeah, I have some slide here. So first of all, what I've done was to check whether how many proposals there were for men and women. So what is a proposal? Of course, a telescope has a limited time for observation, and everyone wants those observations. Everyone thinks that their science is the best. So what we do as astrophysicists, we wrote a proposal. So we wrote what we want to do with those data, with those time. And here you can see that these three different columns are relative to three different time frames. So the medium proposal is up to 25 hours, and so on. So the only difference between these columns is the time that you ask for the telescope. And as you can see here, in every category, there is like 30% of female which are asking for time on the telescope, and while the other 60% is all men. And this is only due to the fact that, unfortunately, women make up only about 20% of the world's astronomers. And here there is the percentage that I've computed for men and women in the membership of two important collaborations which are now analyzing the JWST, the Space Telescope data. And one in JADES is one that I'm a member of, and the other one is CHAIRS, which is also a bigger one than JADES. And as you can see here, more or less the trend is the same. 30% of members are women, and the other 60% is men. And so what we can ask is, are women worse than men in astrophysics? And let's look at JWST. We don't have enough data because it's only online since 3 years, but we have Hubble Space Telescope, which is up since 20 years, so we have a lot of time and statistics to see if women are worse than men. And here you can see the percentage difference between the accepted proposal from men and women. And here you see that in any year, since I cannot see actually what's...
2002.
Okay, from 2002 to 2017, men were always, the percentage of proposal made by men was always larger, the one accepted. So what happened when a proposal is done? Then there is a committee which discuss together all the different proposals and decide which is the best, and so which one got time on the telescope. And here you can see that almost every year men won. So men are better than women. But actually, up to 2017, the proposals were not anonymous. So everyone can read the names of the proposing. When in 2018, they started the anonymous peer review method. And since that year, actually in 2018 was the first year in which women were actually more successful than men, but from that year, the gender gap is now decreasing. So now that we don't see the name anymore, we can actually discuss about science and not about the one who proposed it. And here you can see the cycle 1 JWST proposal acceptance rate, and you clearly see that now there is almost an equality between men and women. And also in the EC proposal type, which is the large proposal kind of survey, so the more prestigious one, you can clearly see that women are more successful than men. Also, I want to highlight the fact that anonymous proposal is not only helping reducing gender gaps, so it's not only helping women, but since the introduction of anonymous proposal, also in HST, for the first time, the number of astronomers which received for the first time the time of the telescope, sorry for the joke, is increased by the factor of 4. So what this means? This means that there are more opportunities for for students, for less famous researchers, for researchers working in smaller groups. And in this case, the only focus was science after the introduction of the anonymous peer review. So it should not be gender, affiliation, the team, the country of origin, or any kind of bias that you can have. The only focus should be science.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Write a paper on those data?
It's a good idea.
Economics has a very nice paper, which is one of the most cited papers by here about the same phenomenon in opera houses. The title is Orchestrating Impartiality. And she found that after that the audition were blinded, the ratio of female-male higher the flipped. So we need to talk later.
Mauro, in any case, it's your time now, so you should explain us why a man is at the table of an International Day of Girls and Women, and you are studying economics, so...
Nobody's perfect.
Thank you.
As Simona said, some of you may wonder why a male economist is part of this panel. And my presentation basically is going around 3 basic reasons why it makes sense, so to speak. So the first one, the first obvious reason maybe, is that underrepresentation of women is also a problem of men. And you touched upon some of the reasons why that is the case, but I will give you an economist perspective on that. The second is that, as I mentioned briefly before, last year the Nobel Committee gave the Nobel Prize to a female economist who, because she uncovered the key drivers for gender differences in the labor market. And some of those key drivers are also relevant for the academic job market. And finally, I also did some research on what can work to say it better, on what it doesn't work, apparently, in some context, to decrease the underrepresentation. And this is a paper I have with Natalia Zinovieva and Emmanuel Bagues on the American Economic Review. So let me first tackle the first point. So it's a problem for everyone, not just for women. This is clear for at least two reasons. One has to do with justice and fairness. Everybody should everybody have the same opportunities. But economists like very much efficiency. This is a sort of jargon word that means that it's not only important to divide the pie fairly, but it's also important to increase the share of the pie. And there is substantial evidence that the gender equality can improve economic growth. Let me show you a figure who comes from a recent report from the Bank of Italy. In this figure, each line, on the x-axis, you have the women labor force participation. On the y-axis, you have GDP per capita in logs. Actually, economists like logs very much, so you can interpret the slope as growth rate. And basically, each line computed at different time level is telling you that, on average, countries who have a higher labor force participation for women has also a higher GDP per capita. The red triangles are Italy in the four distinct phases. I mean, this is telling you that if you take this relationship, this estimated relationship as causal, you may think that if Italy were able to expand its women labor force participation by 10 percentage points, Italy would be in the top group of OECD country, and not in the middle as it is now. But of course, we know very well that correlation is not causation, and it would be very wrong to interpret this chart as causal. And so let me try to tell you what are the structural mechanisms, what are the theories behind why it might be, at least according to economists, it might be possible that more equal opportunity can translate in higher economic growth. So the first mechanism is just mechanical. You may be familiar with the definition of GDP, which was on the y-axis of the chart. If more women participate to the labor market, that also means that there is more GDP, more production, so to speak. And some estimate, again, from the Bank of Italy, estimated in Italy an increase in 10% in labor force would lead to an increase of, roughly speaking, 10% of GDP, which is not bad. But again, this is just mechanical. I think that the channel which is more interesting, it was mentioned briefly by Simona, even if probably she didn't think about it as an economist, but the basic idea, which I think is the most important one, again, is that if we assume that the talents distribution are pretty much similar between men and women, of course this is a bad assumption, I want to talk a bit briefly also later, then any barrier to women having access to some professions or gender career is very inefficient. This is obvious. Then there is the final channel, which was also mentioned briefly by Sveva, which I think in many contexts is true. Let me say that I don't know how general it is. Maybe in some areas, for example, in your working group, you prefer you prefer to work with women, and so we know that teamwork is it's very different among different teams, so it's not always clear. But let me focus on let me tell you something about the second channel. Okay, so this is a figure who comes from a paper published in Science by Hyde et other co-authors. She was Janet, so she was a female. And here, basically, each little square, is the so-called effect size that is simple a difference among means of the score of men and women in math in elementary school grades. This data comes from a huge program in the US. It was called No Child Left Behind. Maybe you remember it. It was one of the biggest George W. Bush program. And basically, they test massively, just millions of men and women in basic math skills in the first 5 grades of elementary school. And basically, what they get that in some here state, men were a bit better, but in some here state, women were better. And I mean, by and large, this graph is telling you that on average there was no statistical difference between the two. This is the so-called, so overall no gender difference at any grade level from 1 to 5. So this is not a place where you want to look to understand why there were those big differences in the STEM careers you mentioned before. And let me also mention that contrary to media attention, and possibly also to what you thought about soft skills, Ida is not an economist, she's a social psychologist, so she knows what she talks about when she talks about soft skills. Let me also tell you that at least my understanding of the literature is that this gender similarity hypothesis also holds not only for skills, but also for psychological traits. So most of the difference we think of about propensity to compete, risk aversion, all those psychological traits in which common press emphasize we are very different from men and women. You know, the psychologists have found that those differences are mostly not there at the very beginning of life, and they mostly be related later on to sticky stereotypes. So let me also, this is a bit more, this is a paper in a slide. Again, the second channel, you remember, if talent are distributed equally among men and women, we really don't know if talents are distributed equally. So this is a very interesting paper published in Econometrica in 2019, which is a very well-respected economics journal, that noted that, let's assume, we don't know how talent are distributed, but let's assume that distribution is equal across time. So in the 60s, talent was distributed across men and women as it was in 2010. On the other hand, occupation distribution shifted a lot, even if Sveva showed us that, unfortunately, in STEM careers, distribution were very similar. In a lot of professions, distribution shifted a lot, and output per person grew very much. So the conclusion among these 3 things, so if we assume that talent is equally distributed across time, occupational distribution shifted a lot, and output per person grew, it makes sense that at least some women were not pursuing their comparative advantage in 1960s. And if you want to add to some very basic reasoning, some assumption about how people select into job, economists call it the Roy model, they estimate that between 20% and 40% of output growth in this period of time can be attributed to a better talent allocation across the economy. This is not just, let me be very honest, this is not just men and women, this is US, and was also black and white people, so Afro-American. So it's not just about women, but gains in productivity can be substantial. Now let me go to the second point. I'm a bit late, so So this is a picture which comes from the Nobel recognition of Claudia Goldin, the economist I told you about, who wrote this very interesting paper about orchestrating impartiality. And this is she's actually an economic historian, and she did very beautiful work in the history of labor market participation of women, and she found this very nice U-shaped evolution of women participation. She found that before Industrial Revolution, women were participating more or less like they're participating now in the labor market, and then their participation went down very much during the Industrial Revolution, and mostly this was due to, economists like to think about the labor market as demand and supply. The demand is firms hiring, and basically this downward trend until the 20th century was due to the fact that in order to work in industry, you need to move away from your home. So basically, it was very costly for mothers that in the previously were able to work from home, basically. I will go back to this point because I hope this working from home model can be a big opportunity for women. Anyway, then with the occupation shifting from industry, manufacturing to services, this changed, and so participation increased at the beginning of the 20th century, and then there were in the 70s, more or less, according to a research, there was this, what she called the quiet revolution, that is a steady increase in the labor market participation of women related to a big change in their educational choice. Some of those choices were related with a very important technology, which is the contraceptive pill. Another very interesting paper she has is on how in different states in the US this labor market participation changed following the legalization of the contraceptive pills. And by and large, there was also a big role for changing expectations. And again, here, sticky stereotypes are also very important. But given that we have probably not in STEM, but in other other areas where women were very much underrepresented, and their wages, the wage gap was also very big. Did a lot of progresses. What is, according to the so-called grand gender convergence hypothesis, that is, things will go better before getting worse. What are the remaining points, according to economists, that need to be addressed in order for this grand gender convergence to close? So the first one is very much pertinent to today's discussion, because it's about education choice. So weirdly enough, women educational choice systematically translate in lower earning in the labor market, and clearly here underrepresentation in STEM fields plays a big role. And the second pain point is about motherhood penalty. We didn't talk much about that, but it might be related to discrimination. Many employers still don't like women because they could become mothers. It also affects the labor supply decision by women. And finally, and this is according to Claudia Goldin in a very nice paper a few years ago, this is according to her, the last grand chapter of this grand gender convergence. In many jobs, the way in which they are structured and remunerated do not favor flexibility. Let me give you the example given by Claudia Goldin. She studied women working in finance and women working in medical areas, in pharmacy, in the pharmacy sector. So in general, the elasticity to working many hours until night, for example, in finance is extremely important. People that stay a lot at work make much more money than people that don't. That was not the case in the pharmacy sector. So comparing these two sectors, she found that the job structure and the way in which jobs are remunerated may be a key part in favoring this kind of convergence. And again, she hopes there are some very recent results which suggest that might be the case. She hopes that the big push towards working from home might help this kind of job flexibility. I'm not a big fan of working from home. Actually, I like to go to office every morning, but still, we should acknowledge that in principle and potentially that might be a factor that could favor this grand gender convergence. So note that in both pain points, what I've called sticky stereotypes are still very much important. And again, in these sticky stereotypes, men are clearly possibly a big part of the problem. So let me finish. Probably I spoke too much. let me finish with some normative implication of what I've said. So these are some of the usual things that can be done, that are not easy to be done, otherwise they would have been done already, but they can be done. So the first one is wars to stereotypes, especially in school and within the family. There is a very nice fellow female economist, Michaela Carlana, who is now at Harvard, who have very nice studies about gender stereotypes in school and how this affect very much female decisions. Second, of course, expand childcare supply, because that decrease the potential, at least potentially, the motherhood penalty. Increase paternity leave. This is also, according to economists, something which might not always, because especially in academia, this is in some areas it has some counterintuitive effect, but still, by and large, it's a policy which is seen by economists with favor, and then firms' organization and diversity management. And here, some of the measures that also universities try to take, especially with respect to time flexibility, are very important. Last but not least, there is also affirmative action and quotas. As far as I understand, Sveva also has done some research on it, and this is one of the reasons why I'm here, because I have this paper in which I show how the gender composition of committees both in Italy and in Spain, of hiring committees, actually is not that important in promotions. I don't know how much time we have to dig into it, but basically what we found is that with some heterogeneity, especially in the context of the Italian Abilitazione Scientifica Nazionale, where committees are randomly drawn, so we were not comparing literature with physics, but we were comparing sectors who have the same degree of feminization, but just for the lack of the draw, that is, this composition was randomly drawn. There were some committees with more women in it, and some other with less women. And we found that, if any, one more woman in the committee had a negative impact on the probability, on the relative probability of women to be promoted. That was not due to the so-called Queen Bee syndrome hypothesis that women were harsher than women. Actually, women were more likely to be favorable to women, but for some reason, which again possibly has to do with more with psychology than with economics, there were men that, when there were more women in the committee, became relatively tougher with women. But if you want, we can talk about that later. Thank you. Sorry for taking too much time.
Thanks a lot, Mauro. And I think that it is also quite important, what you were suggesting, so the correlation between a more gender-balanced society with a richer society, although, I mean, we should not focus only on this. I mean, a more gender-balanced society means also a fairer society, so it's already enough. But I think that from this point of view, we can also attract more people and encourage the men to get into the problem. So you already started introducing the next topic that I would like to discuss today. So we have so far we have shown that there is a gap. We have shown that it is very important, women supporting women. It is important to have this peer-reviewed method that are anonymous. It is very important to have a gender-balanced society. So, what are the initiatives that we can think about to make our society more gender-balanced? And so, I ask Sveva again to talk about this.
So what can be done? A number of things can be done. Nothing, as I said before, is the one that really changes the world, but the more we do, the best we can find. So, of course, speaking of stereotypes, and as every one of us told, you have to start from the very, very beginning, from kindergarten. Elementary school is too late. and it has to go on for all the life. So it should be continued in organization, the structural integration of gender equality. Excuse me. So it's a structural integration, not just something that happens once and then is closed. Difference in the access of careers, in the presence and visibility of women, in the flexible work-life balance. The objective is to to promote the gender-sensitive cultures, not only an organizative culture, which is very difficult because it's very long. Cultural and societal changes are the one that takes much more time. But the organizational one can go towards the cultural change. I was told to speak about the GEP at CNR. GEP, as you may know, is a gender equality plan. It's something that has to be done by the European Union. Luckily, the European Commission, luckily has asked all universities and research centers and institutions to have a gender equality plan to access European funds. And so everyone wake up and said, well, we have to get it. And in a couple of days, things were set up. Not a couple of days, actually, but few months, but still something happened. This is the progression of what we have been doing at CNR. We started from the gender balance the report, and then we did all the progression towards the implementation of GEP. What we planned, it's something that actually is a sort of not specific for CNR. It's something which has been also experienced by other gender plans across Europe. So we have two main pillars, the one of management and monitoring, and the second pillar is the one of training. Training is the easiest, so to say, one, because it's something which can be set up relatively quickly, and is something which actually we set up quickly at CNR. And these pillars, the two pillars are underway. The governance and monitoring one has been started, appointing a gender position and a team that helps the gender equality officer at CNR, and it just started 2 or 3 months ago. So governance and monitoring is definitely important, but it takes a little more time to be set up. The training and awareness one was more easy, and we set up a training plan, and we started the first training activities, both for as I explained, researchers and for the part of directors. And so the importance of creating an awareness and internal network that that means that we have trained a number of female, also male, but mostly female researchers to be those that will develop the training positions and the training activities all over the CNR. So what are the actions that can promote gender equality within an organization? Of course, the actions, as I said, as every one of us said, starts from individual kids to the international and supranational organization. We are just addressing here the organizations, what the research organization, the university can do. As I said, support the gender equality with the gender balance and the gender equality plan, giving more gender awareness in hiring and in promotions. We have done a little video. It has to be seen by all the commissions and all the commissioners before starting the exams and the context for hiring and promoting people. And of course, it's important to have transparent rules in promotion process, and give this to this awareness to the people who will choose the new researchers or advance those that are there. So there must be a better organizational communication approach and policy, also on sexual harassment and discrimination prevention. Again, the organization should ensure an equal access to leadership and development training. And the male diversity and inclusion, one of the main pillar. Diversity and inclusion, not only in gender, as it has been already said, but gender is definitely one of the important part of this. I've been told that also to speak quickly about the role of international forums of research projects and associations. I should speak about this for hours, but I try to just to focus on a few things. This one has been already told you, so I will skip this slide. I will speak you about an interesting activities which is linked to the G20 and to the G7 organization. The G20 and G7 are two big groups of, at the beginning they were just considering economics and economic development and markets. From the 2015, these groups were also given an official importance to two groups which are called Women 20 and Women 7, and these groups are focused, of course, on gender equity. The primary objective is to ensure that all the consideration considering gender should mainstream the G20 discussion and be translated in what is called the Leaders' Declaration, which should, not always happens, but it should commit governments and to foster gender equality and the economic empowerment of women. I've been appointed as an Italian delegate to Women 20 and as an advisor to Women 7. And considering labor and education, the idea at the very beginning, as I said, it was 2015, was to increase by 2025 the introduction of jobs for women by 25%. Of course, this has not been reached. At that time, it seemed a long period, but now 2025 is tomorrow morning, so I'm very pessimist about the possibility that this 25% can be reached. Anyway, it's an indication. And another important goal is to commit governments and organizations in the promotion of STEM studies for girls. And the role of G7 via Women 7 is similar to that one which I told. The last meetings were done in Italy during our presidency, and then in Indonesia, in India, and this year in Women 20 and G20 is organized by Brazil, while G7 and Women 7 is the Italian presidency this year. The thematic agenda is somehow similar. The Brazil one, as you can see, is considering the part of entrepreneurship, or the access of financing and capital and market, which is very important, especially in those, in any country, but especially in those countries which have more difficulties, which have a micro market for women, and accessing this micro market and micro capital can be very important just to start the change. The other topic is women in STEM. The care economy, again, we spoke about this a lot. Tackling the violence against women, and the climate justice. Climate justice is in general also the approach of climate questions, considering gender and the impact that climate has on gender. Whether Women 7 has these other topics in agenda, the financial area, the labor again, the gender-based violence is parallel to the one, peace and security, hopefully, and climate justice again. So something is similar, something is changing, but the area are much the same. Another thing which I will speak with great pleasure is the activity of the association Women and Science, Donne e Scienza, which is an association of cultural association in Italy, and is a parent of the, well, actually, child of our parent is the EPVOS, the European Platform of Women Scientists, which we were one of the founders. And this European platform organizes, well, all the association all over Europe. And we are one of those associations, the Italian one, and I won't read all the things, but the idea is to help women in entering the careers, in mentoring, in organizing something which can be of help for girls, for women, and for researchers within activities. This is another group, the Gender and Talent Group. It's within CNR, and the picture that you see at the end is the one which we made during the presentation of our last report. We made 4 of them. The report is over there. You can download freely from the CNR oddio, come si dice sito? Site. The simple words sometimes go away. The site, and we had the mandate of the president of CNR at the very beginning, and this was actually the starting of the process of preparing the gender budget and of giving the pace to the gender equality plan. We were started there some years ago, some 5 years ago, where nothing happened at CNR, and then all of a sudden the planets aligned, and and a lot of things happened. There is another. This is an European project, Mind the JEPs. It's modeling institution by developing gender equality plans in the NH 2020 project, one of the last one. These are the partners, and the idea is to help partners in reducing gender imbalance in institution, and collect data and help in the advancement of gender equality in research and in the preparation of gender equality plans. This has been very helpful for the gender equality plan in CNR. The approach is to fix the system, not to fix the women, and then to give the proper things that can help in assessing gender imbalance, in designing gender equality plans, and monitoring, of course, and evaluate the progress made. So the entire area from the beginning to the monitoring part actually this is underway. This project looked about. As I said, it was very important for CNR JEPs. The group, an international group, helped CNR as other research institutions across Europe within the partners to collect data, to make interviews, to make surveys, to understand what has been collected, and to use administrative data, which are it's a very important source of data, but of course they're not collected for statistical purposes, but they have to be sort of revised under statistical lens, and also direct surveys on this. This is another project, the last one, Genesis project, is specifically on the analysis of social, economic, environmental governance in the sphere of energy transition. It's something on energy transition and how it affects women and research and so on. And this is another project we are carrying on. And it's also important for applying gender lens to knowledge on energy transition. First conclusion, the important is not only inclusion but empowerment. We've been talking about this a lot. Not, of course, transforming women in men, but considering women not as a separate group with specific quality to be supported, but change intrinsically the way in which gender influences our society, changing the status quo of gender relations and culture. It's a nice sentence, it's very difficult, but it's demanding, and it's something that really will change the situation. I leave you with this photo. Do you remember the 30%? It's something which, during this afternoon, a lot of times came out, 30% here and 30% there. Now, I ask you, count these people. This group was taken at, this photo was taken at Normale in 1910. Isn't it 10%, 30% of women and the rest is men? So, not big changes since then. Thank you very much. Yeah, probably.
So even less,
Even less, even worse. Unfortunately, I couldn't find actually where it was taken and who these people are. Maybe you may. You may many more in the humanities, but still, even there, this is the 30% of it goes around. Thank you.
Thank you, Sveva. So maybe I will go towards the end of this event, and we can leave some time for the question after that. And I want to react to your picture with this picture, just because I would like to take the chance to talk about some initiatives that are here at the Scuola Normale Superiore for trying to release a bit, at least, this gap between men and women. So one of the initiatives I would like to talk about is called Ispira. So in English is Inspire, which stands for Inclusiveness in Sciences, a possibility of identification and representation for women. So the idea is like a kind of outreach project in schools. This is dedicated to around 12, 13-year-old students. This is, I mean, the idea of this project is started from students, PhD students, female PhD students of the Faculty of Sciences, and the idea is just to motivate young women in STEM. The idea is that female students are going to make some seminar in these schools, and I mean also Eleonora and Gizem, they are part of this project, and I thank you very much, both of you, for this. What is the twist, let's say, of this outreach project is that before going to having this lecture at the school, there is a kind of master class which is led by an actress, Valentina Bischi, and so the idea is that with her project, the Atomic Word project, we are trying to rediscovering the art of telling. We are trying to make complex concepts easy ones. We are trying to communicate with young children the fascination, the beauty of science, trying to attract people to sciences, but above all, giving also a women model for young girls. This is just one of the initiatives. The second one, this is starting today. So this is another very nice project. It's called Tomorrow's Women Scientists. So the applications can be submitted starting from today up to the 10th of March. And so the idea is just to give an educational experience experience for female students that are interested in STEM, so they can come here, they can have a stage, they can meet our female scientists, they can, get in touch with what is the life here at Scuola Normale Superiore. So, really grateful to my colleague, Professoressa Mannati, for taking care of this project. Another very important project is what is called the EGMO Camps, which stands for European Girls Mathematical Olympiads. So I was mentioning at the very beginning of this event that most of the students that are passing the exam are students that have before attended these mathematical Olympiads, that there are just in the most of the time 10% of girls that are participating to these Olympiads. So our students are now trying to train female students and are just trying to trigger their interest in mathematics. The participation is free of charge, and this is a project in collaboration with also the University of Pisa and several other universities. Okay. So far we have always talked about gender gap, but what we would really like to do is to build an inclusive society, which means also taking care about all the minorities. And so, I would like also to present several services that are present here at the Scuola Normale. There is, for example, quite new initiatives, that is the help desk to combat gender-based violence. So this started from 2022, and it is an help desk that is managed by the association Casa della Donna, so Women's Shelter. The project is in collaboration with the joint committees for equal opportunity of the University of Pisa, Scuola Normale Superiore and Scuola Sant'Anna, and is the goal is to protect somehow, especially women in the university environment, and so it is intended for anyone who belongs to the university and has suffered acts of threats of discrimination and gender violence. It is of course free, anonymous, and there is no obligation to report. I think that I will stop here. I would like to just underline some take-home messages, but I also ask the speakers if you have any other to add. So what I would say is that a gender gap persists in STEM disciplines, and it is important, very important, to take awareness of the problem. And I think that the International Day of Women and Girls in Science is a good opportunity for meeting and for keeping track of what is the situation and how it is proceeding. The gender bias and the stereotype seems to be still at the origin of the problem. It is important, the support of women from women. This is essential. Apparently, the anonymous peer review method may help to reduce the gap. The gender gap is a problem that is concerning both women and men, and this is because an inclusive society that values diversity is not only an healthier and fairer society, that should be already enough to take care about the problem, but it is also a more economically growing society. Possibly. There are several initiatives that are ongoing to battle the gender gap in STEMs, and are these initiatives working well? It is very important to keep monitoring how and if the problem is evolving. And thank you. And really, if there is any comment, any further question, the time is now.
share the last point you made. I think is very important. Sometimes I have the feeling that there are a lot of initiatives, and it's not easy to keep to learn from them, and to know what works and what do not work. Some quarter of social sciences, not only economics, started to use randomized evaluation also for those kind of programs. So I think I was thinking about this very interesting. I didn't understand all the details of this program on women in mathematics in mathematical Olympic Games, but it seems very interesting. It would be nice to know whether those intervention did have an effect, and the best way of doing it possibly is to try to introduce some sort of either randomization among participants if you have some bottlenecks, or there are other less intrusive way of randomizing. So it would be interesting to know more about it. To quantify how the preparation basically spurred the participation, because on one hand I can clearly see the logic behind this intervention, but also I see some danger, for example, because if you make another championship, is a bit as if like in football you have clear that female footballers are less skilled than men, and that's not true actually. Sometimes, for sure in mathematics, according to the data I show, so it might be also a risk, and so it would be nice to see to which extent that's. I still believe that, don't misunderstand me, I still believe that it's a great program, as far as I understand, but it would be nice to learn from it, not only to do things. Sometimes I have the feeling that, for example, from my observatory at University of Pisa, some of the things are introduced and then assumingly that they will work, but sometimes it would be interesting to test them. Yes, for example.
Yes, I do agree with what Mauro has been saying, and Simona as well. Monitoring the situation is very important, because we try to do our best, but we should also learn the impact of these actions on reality. It's not easy to quantify or to measure the impact, but of course it's important. Otherwise, you continue doing things that don't have an impact, but maybe other things can have a higher impact. So. The second part of after organizing, also monitoring and evaluation of what has been done and how this has been changing the situation is very important. Thank you.
Yes, because you were also showing really a large number of projects that are trying to solve the problem. And apparently, at least from the numbers that we were showing at the beginning, nothing is changing. So how to really, it's not easy to understand what's next and what we can do better. This is, I think, a crucial point.
Let me give a more optimistic message. You were saying sometimes there are just tipping points, if we believe in this idea of sticky stereotypes, things may seem quiet for a long time, but then they can change fast. So we should keep trying. So
we should not extrapolate simply from what has been going.
I mean, I agree with Mauro. I think maybe we are trying, but we just cannot see this in numbers. But maybe the perspective is changing. But then at some point, we will also start to see the change in numbers. So I think we still should try, I think, doing things.
Yes, sure, Luigi.
Well, first of all, many thanks to everyone for, I learned a lot. No, maybe I just want to spend a word about the impact. The impact should not be measured only in terms of the numbers of women which apply to our competition to enter the Scuola Normale. I think these are activities in a broad sense. We will be already happy if by all these things we make many more young women interested in science, they will do whatever they want in the end. And so this comes also to the problem of measuring in a good way the impact, but we should not only narrow down on the Scuola Normale. That will be is not our tradition. Also, if you think about the orientamento, our long-lasting activities, we should think in a slightly more broad sense.
Okay, so I don't know if there is no other question. I think that we can close this event here, and I would like really again to thank Sveva, Eleonora, Gizem, and Mauro, and everybody for being here. Thanks a lot.